Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, I suppose we should get this out of the way. Congratulations on still being in the Mickey Mouse Cup. I'm very pleased for you. But Palace and Everton fans sharing the same embarrassment. Didn't even make it to 3 o'clock on the Saturday. And in a way, that's an achievement, but there you go. But I'm sure you enjoyed watching those goals fly in. I was so disappointed yesterday afternoon, Kieran. I tried to cheer myself up by pretending Middlesbrough-Brighton was a championship relegation match. But you won 5-1, so even that didn't work.
Yes, it was a startlingly good performance.
Yeah, well, that's also it's a bit annoying, isn't it? You can bring on a World Cup winner when you're already 3-1 up away to Middlesbrough.
And he scores a Cruyff-style goal.
Yeah, as a parent, so I'm told. Obviously, I haven't watched it.
I'll be very disappointed if you watched it.
I wouldn't have watched it under any circumstances, Kieran, even if Palace had won. But there you are. It's questions day, Kieran. And I know one of these questions kept you very busy, but the first one comes from Ben Platt. Now, Ben Platt says, as you know, my club, Forest, Nottingham Forest, won the Championship playoff final last season, which will earn the club millions of pounds over the next 3 seasons at least. And it got me wondering, has that money made our financial concerns, if we had any, disappear? Well, I think spending about 200 million quid of it on 25 players probably didn't help, Kieran, did it?
Yes, there was a touch of the Viv Nicholsons from Forest when they were promoted. The belief that if you get promoted, all of your financial challenges are going to disappear is a bit of a myth. Forest lost £250 million from day-to-day activity, £250 million in the decade up to season 2021. So they were reliant upon owners putting money in. Yes, they had some player sales to help them as well.
Yeah.
You get a lot more money if you get promoted. The press, the media, I'm not critical here, the media always say, oh, it's £180 million guaranteed, but that's over 3 years. Yeah, if you go up and you come straight down again, first of all, you immediately lose 1 year's worth of parachute payments. And then, as you rightly pointed out, what will happen is you spend in order to try to survive, and your wage bill goes up. So if we take a look at our two clubs, and Palace have been in the Premier League now for this is the 9th season. We've got accounts. I think we've got accounts. I've got 8 years worth of accounts. Palace have lost money 6 years out of 8. Brighton have lost money 3 years out of 4. So it costs a lot of money to get there, and it costs a lot of money to stay there. So therefore, the clubs don't necessarily become profitable. All that they're doing is that they're dealing with much bigger wage bills and much bigger transfers. And yes, they've got much more money coming in as well. But actually getting the balance right is very difficult. I mean, the one club that did it very well on a long-term basis, and I've championed them in the past, is Burnley. But then, if you spoke to Burnley fans, at times they'd say, "Yes, we got 7th in the Premier League, but that was probably the worst thing that ever happened because we simply didn't have the resources to play Sunday, Thursday, Sunday, Thursday." And some fans have said, that was the start of the decline over the next few seasons.
Which there's a couple of things there, Kieran. First of all, I think I probably should say for people under the age of 55 and anyone listening abroad that Viv Nicholson in the early 60s and her husband won the football pools, which was the Sky Bet of its time, basically. And when asked what she was going to do with the money, said she was going to spend. The other two things, Kieran, football-wise, is we do still. I mean, I buy into it. Even after doing this pod for nearly 3 years, I buy into the idea that promotion to the Premier League sort of gets you 5 years anyway, guaranteed financial solidity. And secondly, to answer Ben's question specifically about Forest, there's a lot of football fans thinking if Forest get relegated, they're going to be in big, big trouble with the amount of money they spent on players, and you wonder what sort of contracts they've got in the case of relegation.
Well, I think Forest are already starting to try to offload some of the players that they recruited in the summer. From an FFP point of view, I think they'll be okay. Ultimately, it comes down to the owner. The owner's spent a lot of money getting the club into the Premier League. They've started to find better results recently as well. And provided you've got an owner that continues to bankroll the club, and there's no evidence that he won't, then I don't think Forest have anything to worry about per se. I think their biggest challenge, as you were sort of hinting at, was how are they going to deal with the legacy of having made so many signings? Normally, when a football club is promoted, that they'll probably have half a dozen players recruited. Yes, other players will be on bonuses and step-ups in terms of their contracts and getting to the Premier League, but that actually buys you a little bit of wiggle room. What Forest have done is clearly they've recruited many players, and therefore they're effectively all coming in on what you would call a Premier League wage. Will they have step downs if the club's relegated? I suspect so, but I think talking to agents, it's a case of how big are those step downs? If it's 20 or 30%, and I've spoken to a chief executive of a Premier League club, and he said, well, that's the most we can realistically ask for. Then it does cause a big issue when the club is relegated, or should the club be relegated. In order for clubs to survive, they probably have to take perhaps a 50 or a 60% pay cut. And if you go to somebody and say, okay, we're Nottingham Forest, we've just been promoted via the playoffs, we're going to offer you 45 grand a week, but you're going to have to take a 60% pay cut if we get relegated. That's not necessarily attractive to somebody who's being asked to sign perhaps a 3 or a 4 year deal.
Yeah, see, Forest fans are doing the same on social media as Palace fans and Bournemouth fans and Everton fans are doing, pretending it's a good thing we got knocked out of the FA Cup because that means teams like Southampton and Leeds have got more games to play. Yeah, it's a false hope, Kieran. Now, Kieran, I think we should mention, by the way, perhaps we should have mentioned this at the start, there might be a slight difference in sound quality just this week from your end because you've been kicked out of your plush office recording suite, haven't you?
That is the case. Yeah. So if you hear strange noises in the background, I've been evicted to the kitchen because the Baroness is decorating both the man cave and the office and most of the rest of the house, and therefore I have to go where I'm told, as is the case. So that first background sound you heard was Finlay eating his wonky chomps in the kitchen on the tiled floor as opposed to the carpet when he comes into the office. So we're slightly more media friendly in the office as a result of me being media time. And in fact, we were on Look North on Friday. And we were announced as the Prince of Football as opposed to the Price of Football.
I like the fact you use the royal we there, Kieran. Like we are the William and Harry of the podcasting world. You got me worried then. So I think I know I drink a lot and forget things, but I don't remember being on Look North. How would I have got there? Yes, I saw that caption, the Prince of Football. It made me laugh very much. But I may have to get the RSPCA onto you, Kieran, because it's very cruel that you're making your dog eat wonky chomps off a cold granite tiled floor rather than his normal shag pile carpet that he's used to. I suspect, Kieran, this next question from Paul Garrett is the one that's been causing you some spreadsheet mayhem, which I know you love a bit of spreadsheet mayhem, but we started a little bit late because you were mid-mayhem and also dealing with a sulky dog. It comes from Paul Garrett, and Paul Garrett's question is, the Premier League pays out different sums of prize money to each club depending on the position they finish in each season. I was wondering whether, instead of pounds per finishing position, would pounds per point work as a better way of distributing this merit money? It's an interesting question, Kieran, isn't it? I mean, normally points and your finishing position would sort of correlate, but sometimes you probably could have a team, 3 or 4 teams on the same points, that goal difference is going to cause them to lose out on £8 million.
You're absolutely right. So for people that are not familiar with the Premier League distribution system, the way that it broadly works is that 50% of the money is allocated on an even basis. 25% of the money is distributed based on the number of times that you appear on live television. And that's perfectly understandable. I think we have to be realistic that the likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester City, and so on, they are more attractive to a TV audience than clubs. And we've got to include our clubs there as well. We live in the real world. And the final 25% is based on where you finish in the table. And it works out as 2.1 million per position. So this means that Manchester City get 20 times as much money as the side that finishes bottom, which last season was Norwich. So Paul's question came in, and what I had to do was to get out the spreadsheet to work out the number of points earned by each club, to look at the total amount of money which is distributed on the merit system, which is £430 million, and then reallocate it on a points basis. So I was having great fun, as you can imagine, but I started this at 11 o'clock last night, and I was getting the look. Yeah, and I suspect there's not many other people in this situation who get a look from the person you love along the lines of, you better close that fucking computer and quickly when you're in bed together. But that was the look that I was getting. So therefore I had to reconvene this morning. And it took me by surprise because I initially thought that we've seen Manchester City and Liverpool, especially in recent years, reach unparalleled level of points in a season. So therefore, my initial thought was, well, those two would earn even more money. But that didn't prove to be the case, because Manchester City got 93 points and Norwich, who finished bottom, got 22. So that's effectively 4.5 times the number of points. So what happens here is it narrows the top and the bottom. So Norwich City, instead of receiving £2.1 million, would have received 9.2, and Manchester City would have been slightly down. They had a 93-point season, so they were down a couple of million. But the biggest losers in this were Manchester United, and the reason for that is that if people remember, Manchester United finished sixth in the table, but they were a long way behind the side that finished fifth. And the biggest beneficiaries were Burnley at the bottom of the table, who were relegated. So it's an interesting distribution method. And another listener to the show, Lee Ayres, I put the numbers out on social media on Sunday morning before we recorded the show. Said, what would we do? How would it work out if it was based on the number of goals scored? And I read this aloud in the kitchen, which was a mistake to say that I am in the kitchen by myself, because the look was amplified by the Baroness. And I said, "Oh yeah, I could probably spend a couple of hours and work that out." And now, I'm sorry, Lee, I'm not going to do it just yet.
Well, Lee's a Palace fan, so why he's worried about working it out on goals scored is beyond me. Our next question, Kieran, comes from Alan Hemphill. And basically, Alan wants to know, was there ever a resolution to the conflict with Rangers and Cinch about the SPFL sponsorship deal? And if so, were there any changes to the financial package?
Right. I think that we've got two questions here in respect of Alan's query. My understanding is that an agreement was reached between the SPFL and Rangers Football Club. And the reason why there was a dispute in the first place is that the league sponsor, as it were, are the car firm Cinch. And Rangers chairman, a guy called Douglas Park, he also has a car company that sells cars. So he had a sponsorship arrangement with Rangers, and the view taken by Rangers is that if there is a conflict between an existing sponsorship arrangement and anything which is agreed centrally, then they don't have to participate with this. I think initially the SPFL were saying, well, come on, guys, you're Rangers, you benefit, and all of the other clubs in the SPFL benefit from this. But Rangers felt that it wasn't fair, or rather their chairman, I think in particular, felt that this wasn't fair because it was taking away attention from his arrangement with the club. So they came to an agreement which appeared broadly to be in favour of Rangers, in the sense that Rangers do not have to participate. So we often see interviews with players and managers after the match, and they always stand in front of those sort of polycarbonate or laminate sheets where you've got the name of all, the names of all the sponsors are splattered over. In respect of other clubs, that still involves Cinch. With respect to Rangers, it doesn't. And the other thing which has taken place, and this is personally, if I was the Rangers captain, I might be secretly slightly disappointed in this. All of the captains of the SPFL Premiership teams got an opportunity to do a photo op and a selfie with Ryland, except Rangers.
No.
So you've got the Celtic and you've got the Aberdeen and the Hearts and the Hibs, and they got the thumbs up and the big smiles with Ryland. Let's face it, it's always going to be a big smile with Ryland. But Rangers sadly missing. And personally, as a man that admires Ryland's attempts to replicate Olivier Giroud's haircut, I would be slightly disappointed.
Well, listen, if the Rangers captain is listening, trust me, Ryland would only be too happy to have a separate photograph with you.
Yes,
it won't take a lot of organising. I mean, why would you not want to be photographed when you look like that? He's a lovely chap as well, actually, very intelligent, but he loves a photo, whereas you and I was going to say you and I shun the limelight, Kieran, but you don't. As you said, you're a media tar. You run embracing the arms of the limelight, if limelight can have arms. Our next question, Kieran, is... I'm sorry, I want to go back to that then, because the second part of Alan's question was about changes to the financial package. If I was the CEO of Cinch, or the person making the decision to spend this money, surely you'd be looking for some sort of discount on the deal then, if one of the two highest profile clubs by a long, long way are refusing to take part in the deal that you arranged with the SPFL. Would that have happened?
From what I've heard, the value of the deal has been maintained.
Okay.
Rangers, ironically, still get a share of the money because the money from Cinch goes into the overall pot, which is then allocated effectively on a merit basis, on a final position basis. If I was Cinch, part of me would be quite happy, because they've actually gathered and gained more publicity and more attention from the story than from the deal itself in certain respects. And we saw this in the Qatar World Cup with the alcohol ban. From was it Budweiser? I think it was Budweiser. They got worldwide attention, whereas if you're just coming up on the adverts, as because the first thing you do at halftime, of course, is you I would say if I was an old man, I'd say you go and make yourself a cup of tea. But what you tend to do these days is check your WhatsApp groups to see what's been chatted in the last 5 or 10 minutes, and you don't look at the television. So I think in a funny way, all of the parties have benefited. Cinch have got more column inches from this, and they've been seen to do nothing wrong. And in fact, by maintaining the level of sponsorship, they're trying to position themselves here as the good guys, saying, well, okay, we understand Rangers' position, but we're not going to we're going to ensure that there's no less money going into the SPFL. And that could actually be a sort of a positive signal from a marketing and commercial point of view, which is, of course, what they're there for. Rangers feel that the position that they've taken, which is on a business point of view, and Rangers, I think it's fairly well known. They've got issues with the SPFL, but Rangers do have quite a long list of people that they're not particularly happy with, but they feel that they've protected the interests of one of their senior investors, and there's as much money coming into the game as before.
Sometimes I feel, Kieran, there's a certain Machiavellian touch to your brain, the way you think. And I explained who Viv Nicholson was. I'm not going to explain who Machiavelli was, so you can look that up. But I should point out as well that during the World Cup, I had to watch all the adverts in case my son popped up on the ITVX advert, because Ali thought it would be a gross, terrible bit of parenting if we missed any of them. Now, Shishir Kulahali has our next question, Kieran. And it's a very interesting one. It's a very valid one. But some part of me thinks it kind of goes against everything that we believe somehow on the pod. And I'm almost hoping that the answer you give is a negative one, even though it is a very good question. And Shishir Kulhali says, last season Milan won the Serie A title with the youngest squad and were in a far better financial shape than just a few years ago. Are we to take away the lesson that ownership by a private equity fund could be a force for positive change in the football industry, given the gross financial mismanagement going on at virtually every level of the game? Maybe these equity funds could force football to get their house in order, even though their ultimate goal is pure financial profit.
It's an intriguing question,
isn't it? Just
Shishir, absolutely. I think we need to take a step back and say, what is the objective of football? Because from a private equity perspective, as he rightly says, the aim is profit maximization. And the way that private equity, for people unfamiliar with the nature, a private equity fund works as follows. You've got ridiculously wealthy people have got large amounts of money, and they don't just want to keep it in the bank account. So therefore, they go to a private equity company and they say, right, here's 10 million, and there's lots of them, and the private equity says, right, we will build up a fund of money and we will manage that on your behalf by buying companies and investing in industries which we think are underperforming. So they do that, and they think that football, and European football in particular, ticks that particular box. So therefore, they've gone in and they've bought clubs with the aim of turning them round financially. Now, that may or may not coincide with an improvement on what you see on the pitch. But what you will see from private equity is, first of all, they will try to reduce costs. Now, costs is another word for jobs. So it could mean that back office jobs go. You and I have been around football long enough to know that actually some clubs are a bit chaotic and they could be more efficient from a purely financial point of view. But part of the reason why we love them is because they're actually trying to do good for the local community as well. So all of these things, such as potentially, the academy would be viewed purely as a financial activity. Would the private equity companies be interested in doing football for groups? Old men's walking football, the type of stuff that I do, and so on. They'd probably say, well, unless it makes a profit, sack it off. We've spoken about the pride that we've had from football clubs reaching out and saying, right, we're going to provide quiet rooms, safety rooms, warm rooms. Well, from a private equity point of view, it's red line, red. Yeah, they say that goes. There is, and I don't want to sound too callous here, but there is no moral, ethical, or social compass coming from anybody in the private equity industry. They have a job to do, which is to maximise the financial return for their investors.
So, Kieran, sorry to interrupt you there, but otherwise I might forget to ask this question. Is there no sense from them that, at least from a PR point of view, those things are worth doing because they don't cost much, or are they really generally, literally only looking at figures and don't care about the human side at all?
You might find some funds which are an environmental or an ethical private equity fund, because it could be set up for people who are independently, very successful, who want to do this. So you could have specific funds, but the general aim has always been one of let's just try to make as much money as possible. And sometimes they will take the view. Because I remember when Manchester United agreed to pay the real living wage, and for me, I think that's possibly the greatest achievement of this show, because we used to just slag them off for it all the time. And eventually I got a call from one of their comms people to say, we're getting bad publicity for this. You shut up about it and we'll do it, because it's not actually going to cost us very much money. And also, let's not take 100% of the credit for this. There's lots of other people that have been doing the same thing, trying to highlight some of the misfeasances of the industry. So if I was involved in private equity, what would I be looking for? I would be looking to boost revenues, and I'd be looking for certainty of revenues as well, i.e., I'm in favour of Super League. Who was behind Super League? It was JP Morgan. It was the Glazers. It was FSG. All of these people for whom football is not a passion. It's not a sport. It's not one of the biggest loves of their life. It's a business. So Super League, games taking place overseas, I think they would describe as, we've decided to revisit ticket pricing. And again, I've been critical of clubs. Manchester United haven't increased season ticket prices for around about 10 years. And going back to your previous observation, part of the reason for that is that they know that they'd get so much negative publicity that it's probably just not worth the aggravation. But also, to be fair, there are some really good people at Manchester United who are from Gorton and Urmston and so on, and understand the importance of Manchester United to Manchester. Whereas from an outsider's perspective, the club is seen as being as a global brand and so on. Private equity normally looks for an exit route after 3 to 5 years, but it does seem to be looking to get involved in football probably on a longer term basis. So there could be some pure business improvements in respect of Shishir's perspective. And that could reduce the possibility and probability. We've got a complaining dog in the background.
Isn't that a yoga position?
Yes. But whether that would be better for football, would it be better for the big clubs? Yes. Would it be better for the big club owners? Without doubt. But the reason why we as fans united in a way that we I've never seen before in respect of Super League, is that even if you are a fan of Chelsea or Manchester United or Liverpool, you still believe in the romance of the sport. As we saw yesterday, third round of the FA Cup, the club with the richest owners on the planet lost to third-tier Sheffield Wednesday.
What a game.
And it was great to watch as well. It was fantastic.
And especially as one of the goals was offside and there's no VAR. That's perfect.
Yes. So we would have a more clinical, a more financially astute game. It would be like an American franchise,
right.
And therefore de-risked. Far more commercial. They would be pushing for 4 quarters instead of 2 halves because you can make more money from advertising. Football, as we've known historically, would be different. On a personal level, I would find it appalling. All of my mates would. I'm sure you would as well. Yeah. But they would find an audience that would perhaps buy into it.
I'm sorry to ask you again, King, but I'm just really interested in Shishir's question. But bearing in mind everything you said about private equity owners coming in, wanting a Super League, wanting 4 quarters. So in terms of the people that bought Ipswich, for example, surely they can't be thinking, that was a private equity fund. We've talked about that a lot. I mean, it's difficult to imagine that they would be thinking about changes to European structure, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think theirs was more of a pension fund than a private equity fund.
Oh, okay,
so
right.
What tends to be the case with a pension fund is that you're looking for you don't tend to be looking for day-to-day involvement. You're looking for a longer-term return. And I think there's a case for saying that, I think League One's fascinating at present because Derby, Sheffield Wednesday, Portsmouth, Charlton, Ipswich, and so there are lots of what we would think of as big provincial clubs, and in the case of London, of course, they're London as well. In the case of Charlton, and where is their natural position? I would say, I think that Ipswich top half of the Championship, bottom half of the Premier League potentially, because Norwich have got that. Well, what have Norwich got that Ipswich haven't? Apart from, I think Norwich are very well organised. And I think that's where the Ipswich owners have come in, and that's where they've seen opportunity. They feel that the club is underperforming. So that goes back to sort of the private equity. You're looking at businesses where you feel that their present position doesn't represent their potential position, and that's where you can make a difference.
I'm on about to say, Kieran, that Charlton, of course, are a provincial club. Our next question comes from Chris Hayward, and I'm slightly worried about it, Kieran, because it starts with words, I understand. Now, these are the words that I use whenever I'm asking a question that I either don't understand or I have information that is probably completely wrong. I might as well say, a bloke in the pub told me, is this true? But Chris says, I understand that the Premier League owners and directors test is different to the EFL owners and directors test. Who bears the costs of carrying out these tests? Is it the Premier League and the EFL or the clubs themselves? And also, how long do they remain valid for? But I have to say, again, it's one of those things, Kieran, excuse me, that in all the years we've been doing this, it's never occurred to me to think how much these tests might actually cost, or whether they do cost anything.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Well, we have asked the EFL to come on, and they keep saying yes, but we're a bit busy at present. So I think this will be a fascinating question if we can get one of the guys on. So we are in communication, and I think this would be great for them to be able to give a more in-depth answer. But the long and the short of it is that those costs are borne by the institution itself, and what tends to happen in respect of the owners and directors test is that the Premier League has more resources, and we know that because of the TV deals and so on. So that's why it took 3 years for the Newcastle deal to be approved. The Premier League, it does sometimes move at a fairly glacial pace if it has queries. And it's also far more political, I think, than the EFL in terms of who are the owners to be. But those costs are actually borne by the institutions themselves. There was, in my view, a fairly laissez-faire approach taken a few years ago at the EFL level, where owners were coming in and effectively self-certificating. Mm-hmm. They're saying, do you have any outstanding convictions? Oh, certainly not. Tick that box. Can you fund the company? You tick the box which says yes, and then you had Steve Dale and co. being able to acquire clubs, or in the case of Steve Dale, he just simply refused to pass on the information as to his resources, and the deal went through. And to give the EFL some credit, they've changed their constitution to make things more challenging and to increase the size of the hurdles that potential owners have to overcome. So that's the first part of Chris's question. And the second one, he said, is there a length of time that you qualify for? And it's not like it's not like a license which is 3 years or 5 years. It's a case of once you're in, you're in.
Oh, right.
So you don't have to reapply if all of a sudden you've appeared in the equivalent of the News of the World, whatever it is today, with the donkey, the bath of custard, and 3 lines of cocaine. If you're the club owner, you're still clear. as far as that is concerned, because you passed the initial test.
I don't know where you're taking these 3 lines of cocaine, Kieran, in a room with a donkey and a bath of custard, but I wouldn't suggest trying the donkey, to be perfectly honest. So that's an interesting one, Kieran. That seems to me to be so if, on the remote off chance that I wanted to buy an EFL club, cobbled the money together and got a positive stamp on my EFL passport to say I'm a fit and proper person, so no matter what happened to me in the next 3, 4, 5 years, I could still take over a club without having to give any more information. So, as you say, that's forever. So if Chris Kirchner got one, there's nothing to stop him, no matter what happened in the next 2 years, buying another club.
Well, no, that applies. It's done on a deal-by-deal basis.
Oh, I see.
If he bought Derby County and then sold Derby County and then applied to buy Burton Albion, he would have to go through another set of tests. It's based on a club by club.
I see. I've got you. Okay. Yeah, I was distracted by the donkey in the bath of custard. Our penultimate question comes from Randy Eshelman. Randy says Warner Brothers Media won the Champions League broadcast rights, covering 39 countries in Latin America for last season. That meant that TNT Sports and, importantly, HBO Max were the broadcasters here in Mexico. What they did was split match days between the two platforms, TNT being available in the most basic cable satellite packages, while HBO Max was an additional premium subscription. As one of many who refused to subscribe to yet another platform, I missed out on viewing essentially half of the available matches. Now, although UEFA sells these rights to the highest bidder and reaps the rewards, wouldn't the in-match sponsors have a say as to the reach of the broadcasts? It seems like any savvy business person would have taken into account the economies of Latin America and realised that there just aren't that many more pesos, reals, cordobas, etc. available for services within services, and then stipulated something in the contract about guaranteed number of viewers. I couldn't think of any way of subbing that question, Kieran, because all the information was necessary. But basically, Randy makes a very good point. If you're advertising or sponsoring some of those games in Latin America, and then suddenly half of them are not available to a lot of people, you would be pretty miffed, wouldn't you?
I think you would, and I think here the likes of UEFA have to do their sums carefully. What UEFA are effectively saying is that if let's say that we've got a single TV deal which is worth 100 million, if we split that into 2 deals for 2 separate broadcasters, we could possibly get 60 or 70 million from each of them. So therefore we end up with more money. So that's the rationale. And that's, of course, what we see here in the UK, where we've got our senior broadcast partners for the Premier League in the form of Sky, BT and Amazon. And then the Premier League have done the same with the radio rights with the BBC and TalkSport. And it tends to work. From a financial point of view, but I think I don't want to make this sound negative. In what you might call your secondary and tertiary markets, your minor markets, and this is not being critical of the South American broadcasters or the South American viewers, because their focus tends to be more on the domestic, just like our focus tends to be on UK and European football as opposed to the MLS and what's happening in Africa and South America and so on. I don't think they'd be too worried about the loss of numbers in terms of commercial partners, because the numbers aren't huge to begin with. So, and also when you've got an organisation such as the UEFA Champions League, you've got your 6 headline sponsors who tend to be more European based anyway. So therefore, the level of sales that they're likely to undertake is not going to be critical. And I think that's also replicated in many regards in terms of what we see in the Premier League. So we have many football clubs, for example, who have front of shirt sponsors from overseas gambling companies. Now, they're not actually particularly bothered that as a UK subscriber, I've got to pay for Sky and BT and Amazon and have my BBC license and so on, because they think that their global audience is still going to be big enough, and the Premier League tends to sell deals and packages on a country by country basis or a broad location basis, and it looks at the total number of people viewing. And frankly, if I'm W88 or ManBetX, the number of people who are paying for those services in the UK are close to zero to begin with. So if you halve that by having two broadcasters, you don't actually lose anything in terms of your broadcast, so your commercial push to punters.
So in terms of the Premier League, Kieran, we know that there are certain rules that indicate that every team in the Premier League has to be on television a certain amount of times. But beyond that, once the Premier League have sold their rights to Sky, BT, the BBC, do the Premier League not really care what they do with them and how much they charge for each game once they've made their own money?
No, the Premier League has the deal, and what's intriguing about the deal is, as a football club, you get paid for 10 live broadcasts a year, but you don't necessarily get broadcast 10 times. I know 2 or 3 seasons ago we mentioned Burnley were. I think this is a crazy thing. The season that they finished 7th, they were only on television live 7 times, but they got paid for 10 because what the broadcasters like is they like relegation scraps.
Of course,
because you and I, we even if our teams aren't playing, I will tune in to watch. If Forest are playing Southampton, because there's jeopardy in the game. And I think what had happened with Burnley is that if it had been, if Brighton were playing Burnley, because we had 3 seasons when we first joined the Premier League where we were genuinely in danger of relegation for quite a bit of the season. If Brighton were playing Burnley had no chance of going down. They were chasing 7th.
Yeah,
but,
I get you.
Apart from Burnley fans, and a fantastic achievement, by the way, there wasn't a huge amount of interest in it. And then you've got a side that's trying to avoid relegation. There would be a better choice from the broadcaster's point of view. So as you dive more and more into it, and we've got friends who work in the broadcasting industry, they say it's a science as much as an art as to how the matches are chosen on a week by week basis. I think you are limited. You cannot have Manchester United and Liverpool appearing 38 times. I think there's an effective ceiling on the number of times you can appear as well, although that's never sort of explicitly described or confirmed by the broadcasters and the Premier League. But you never tend to see more than 29 games a season, perhaps the very occasional 30. Whereas we've been around long enough to know which clubs will always generate the biggest broadcast numbers on a match by match basis, and that's why wasn't it for something like 16 seasons every Manchester United FA Cup game was shown on live TV by BBC and ITV, because they generate the numbers. And they could be playing somebody really dull at home, which was effective walkover, and it would still be chosen because it was there wasn't that constraint that exists in terms of the Premier League deals themselves.
Yeah, and in terms of picking the games for Sky in particular, we know, Kieran, because we know people there, that they have to make the choice sort of 5 to 6 weeks out. In an ideal world, Sky would be deciding 3 days before which games are on, depending on local. But they know that there would be even more of a fuss than there is now if a game is rescheduled with only 3 or 4 days' notice rather than 5 or 6 days' notice. Our last question, Kieran, comes from Mark Ridley, and this one's for me, Kieran. A lot of these questions, let's face it, they're for you, Kieran. They're of interest to you. Of course, I'm interested, and I love hearing your answers. But with my old HR hat on, and it's a very old HR hat now, Kieran, it still says personnel. Still get confused as to how many N's and how many L's there are, even though I was a high-ranking personnel manager in the NHS. But Mark Ridley has this question, and I got the hairs on the back. If I had a spreadsheet, Kieran, this one would have gone straight into it. If I'd known how to open the spreadsheet, even, or what one is, this one would. I don't think I need a spreadsheet for this question, thinking about it, Kieran. Mark Ridley says, how much annual leave do players get? Most employees tend to get 20, 25 days a year, but if you're a top-level footballer, your domestic season might go on until the end of May, and then every 2 years, an international tournament normally takes place in June before a return to training in early July. As players can't take leave during the season, do they get compensated for leave they can't take? I just love the idea of Harry Kane or Wilfred Zaha going to the HR department at Tottenham or Palace and going, I'm owed 3 days. I can't take them before the end of the year. Well, you'll have to pay me for them. No, you'll have to miss the next game, Wilf. I'm sorry, you've got to go on holiday.
This is an intriguing one. So I contacted one of our football agent colleagues, friends, who said that the football player is ultimately contracted for the whole of the football season by the club. So therefore, when the club's season ends, which can be at the end of the 38 or 46 games but you might be in a cup
the end of
or so on.
The end of February, if you're a Palace fan, yeah.
Then you're entitled to go on leave, and they will say, pre-season starts on the 6th of July. So for most players, they would have that period of 7 or 8 weeks, perhaps, in which they're free to do as they so choose. When it comes to the international tournament, so we've got the World Cup and we've got the Euros and so on. Mark's absolutely right. That does cause a further problem. And this links to something which Gianni Infantino is about to cause even further anguish about. Yeah. Because remember, he wants a 3-year cycle in which you're going to have the World Cup taking place every 3 years, the European Championships every 3 years, and the FIFA World Club Championship every 3 years. And I think then there would be genuine issues arising. And we've seen that players have come back from an in-season World Cup in a variety of ways. As a Brighton fan, we lost Alexis McAllister because the club said, "Look, you just won the World Cup, have 2 weeks off." Yeah, and I think they did the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We still lost his contribution, which if we're fighting relegation, that could have been critical. We've seen the issues with Calvin Phillips in terms of his level of fitness and physique as a professional athlete has been questioned by the manager. Some players, Ben White came back from the World Cup early for reasons, and that was uncertain. And again, I don't want to talk about Brighton too much, but Trossard went to the World Cup with Belgium. Belgium had a pretty crap World Cup, and he's come back and he's sulked, so he's not even in the squad anymore. So these things can cause an awful lot of disruption. And in terms of the annual leave, the end of the season is effectively been pushed back a wee bit. It does cause constraints, and we've got clubs such as Chelsea who are registering a ridiculous number of injuries because we say, oh, you're paid a lot of money, so therefore you can take your holidays when you retire, but footballers are getting more and more injuries during the season because they are elite athletes, and you cannot keep squeaking the pips or pipping the squeaks, whatever you call it, in terms of what you're trying to extract from somebody elite at whatever level. You work in the world of entertainment, and you will have colleagues who have been through pretty horrendous times when everybody thinks they're being really successful because there's so much pressure to get out the next show, the next album, and so on. And I think we've got to acknowledge that there has to be a balance correctly struck. And last Friday, I believe that there was a meeting between the FA and the Premier League and the EFL because of the increasing demands being placed on players. Although it's interesting to note that nobody's actually saying that more and more matches in the Champions League is actually a bad thing, apart from probably the fans who go to the games thinking, why are we doing this?
Yeah, you realise we lost a lot of listeners halfway through that question as they went off to Google whether you squeak the pips or pip the squeaks. And I'm not entirely sure what the answer is to that. I love Belgium, Kieran. I think it's a wonderful country. But I feel I should apologise to every single person in it because quite clearly the Belgium squad couldn't operate under the pressure of my £10 on them to win the World Cup. clearly, word got around. You tell by the look on De Bruyne's face, it's like we can't live up to that sort of stress. Thank you to everyone who ordered a limited edition Price of Football replica shirt last month. Your shirts are now being ethically manufactured, and we will get them out to you in around 4 weeks' time, hopefully. And thanks to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that would be very kind. And you can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. We'll be back on Thursday with our news pod, but if you have a question you'd like answered on our questions pod, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran, fourth rounder Maguire, for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you to everybody on Patreon and all of the other kind things and words that you send us. It does keep me going at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night when I'm investigating a question. I can't let the listeners down. Although it's not necessarily good for my domestic environment.
I just love the idea of the Baroness. You go, I can't let Liers down. Liers has asked this question. But how many Baroness go? It's Liers. He's a really nice bloke. I don't care, says the Baroness. Put the light off, go to sleep. You've got to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do Radio West Derby.
So Patreon's one way of supporting the show. Another way is giving us a review on using your app. It's based on the number of stars. It helps us in terms of the charts and so on. And by all accounts, it doesn't matter what you write in the narrative of the review. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by Rylan and James Tavernier, the Rangers captain, because I think it'd be great for those two to get together.
They'd be too busy having a photograph taken to do any podding, Kieran.
True.
James Tavernier, I'll tell you, Ryland's a very nice fellow. And Liers, I reckon, owes me about 3 pints of Guinness in the portions now. He's never been mentioned so much in public. Bye, everyone.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.